That covers hay.
We could set up in the band quicker than that.
Almost.
No, not really. Not the likes of Johnny Regan.
No. Because you played with Johnny, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Johnny and Chris in different bands.
Right. Okay.
So Chris was. I'm not quite sure what happened there with the transition between. I've had this conversation with John as well after I left Vigilante. I wasn't quite sure what happened in the dynamics in the band, whether Johnny had gone off to start playing with someone else. Yeah. And because Chris then came into the band, and then they stayed as a three-piece, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so there's a lot of things that John and I have spoken about which we don't really recall what the exact circumstances were.
When was the last time I saw you? Would it have been? We haven't seen you since we left for Australia, have we?
No, we haven't. No. And I also seem to recall that there wasn't much of a. Well, certainly personally, it wasn't much of a sending off either.
No,
I don't know. I think it almost came to the end of something. Denigh, presumably.
Yeah.
So I still have difficulty remembering you being involved in engineering the sound when I was in the band.
No, I wasn't. I'd left. No, I'd already gone, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, that does clear something up.
It was... I actually can't remember the year exactly. I mean, obviously we were still here. But it was before the kids were born, so... Yeah.
See, I reckon it was probably around 80...
When did you join?
I don't know. I really don't know. And I did start looking at some old diary notes to see if I could find, particularly... the first gig was East Cliff Pavilion. And I don't know what date it was. No. I suspect that it was around about 85.
Yeah.
Because I was in Bronze and a good friend of mine, Colin, who's sadly no longer with us, we were the two guitarists in Bronze, and we went on holiday in 84 together, so I suspect I was still in Bronze at that point.
Yeah,
right. So I reckon it was probably 85 or that.
Yeah.
But you'd long gone. I mean, did you ever see Bronze?
White Line,
okay.
Or White Line? White Line,
yeah.
I think I saw you there.
Right.
With Ian Smith as the vocalist.
That's it.
Yeah. I seem to remember that.
But funny enough, I did find diary notes in 82, which is, I made a note that Phil was in deep conversation with John after a gig, and I sort of commented that things didn't look quite right.
Yeah.
And then I found a subsequent diary note about Phil talking about me potentially joining the band. Mm-hmm. But that was a lot earlier than the actual time that I did join.
Yeah.
So obviously when they went to a three-piece, they were thinking about, should we look to complete the lineup to a four-piece again? But that didn't happen for some while, as you know.
Yeah.
So they remained a three-piece for quite some time.
Yes, yeah. I always felt they were better as a four-piece, whether that was with Ian or the...
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of the pieces were written for the two guitars, and also gave Phil the more freedom to do the expressive stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
If he's got somebody behind him, keeping the riff and stuff. Yeah. Which I always find a bit lacking with a three-piece, but I mean that's that's just the dynamic of three-piece. So you were involved with pretty much every recording, except for the single. I mean, you were on every album and every collection. Yeah.
Well, anything that was done in the studio, certainly. I mean, of course, there was the live gig at the Lees as a three-piece with Chris and John and Phil. But all of the studio stuff. And the studio stuff was... of course, that was my first introduction to studio.
Yeah.
I had subsequent, experience with Vigilante. And it was not anything like I expected at all. I thought, there's two sides to that. Of course, with the Vigilante experience, it was like I expected. It was long hours in the studio, laying down stuff individually and going back over stuff and retakes and sitting there and playing around and, whole weekends taken up at the recording studios. Whereas from my recollection, with Chris Ashman and the Fire from the Sky, we were in the studio and out again. As far as I remember, we probably recorded it virtually live. Now Phil did go back in and laid down the acoustic elements on that acoustic guitar that was still over there.
Wow!
And then he added a third guitar on Touch Me, if you remember. Got this weird panning between the two sides, stereo with the third guitar. My recollection was that was it really. And we went back in after Chris had done his production work, post-production, and I think we just said, that's fine, that's wrong with it. But it was quite an unusual, not a great. I do not like studio work. It's I much prefer playing live.
Why is that, do you think?
Just for the freedom and the fact that if you make a mistake, then it gets forgotten about. But of course, there's sound engineers can do magical things these days.
Correct
mistakes.
A lot more tools out there now. We didn't even know what compression was back then. So I mean, it's which good or a bad thing, depends how you look at it. So I guess some of that would have been, you would have been playing those songs live long before you went in and recorded them, so you kind of knew the song.
Well, because I was a huge fan of Denigh right from the outset. I remember going to their second or third gig at the Golden Arrow pub, in Golden Valley, and Steve was the guitarist in the band at that point.
That would have been the original lineup.
The original lineup, pre-Phil. So that was the sort of my first experience of listening to Denigh, and I became a huge fan. I would be down listening, following the band around, the pubs in Kent. And I knew the back catalogue. So when Phil said, "Would you like to join?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I can't remember a lot about that experience of joining the band. In terms of rehearsing, I think it was a case of here's a few tapes Phil gave me, and from live recordings, and it was a case of just playing along to them, and so I don't remember much about the rehearsal process. The first gig was the East Cliff Pavilion, and I'm not sure how long we'd been in rehearsals, or I'd been learning the material at that point. So it was a fairly easy ride in that respect.
And if you knew all the material because you were a fan, that helps too, I guess, with the timing and stuff.
That's right. And ECP was a great gig as well, because Ian joined us on stage at the end.
Wow, okay.
And from memory, we played Freebird. So we had 3 guitars.
Wow.
And I'm sure we did No Way Off or Foxy, it may have been, but certainly Freebird.
Oh, wow.
That's the only time I've played with Ian. It was great fun. That first gig was probably my favourite gig.
Wow.
With Denigh.
Okay, because you had some big experiences with the band, really. I mean, the East Cliff Hall gigs were as such, certainly. But nothing was quite like the ECP. I suppose because it's I'm playing my debut, and much closer to the audience then, also coming off the stage at the end, and this surreal, fans wanting us to sign
things.
Yeah.
Body parts.
Okay, I'll get that tattooed later. Yeah.
And but also I know that the hall, it was owned by the district council at the time, I'm sure. And we got a letter from them afterwards saying that we'd either gone through, fire safety limits, or we were too loud or whatever.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people at that gig, and it was hot and sweaty night.
Yeah.
So it was very personal. But East Cliff Hall, I think the bigger the gig, the more relaxed I felt about it.
That's
I
great.
think playing in a small pub, with the audience right on top of you, right in there.
Yeah.
The East Cliff Hall gigs were very good, particularly the one we did just before Christmas, which Radio Kent recorded.
We're working on trying to restore those. We've got the original tapes, so we're hoping that they will come out as an archive of the band. But just a question of how trying to extract the information out of the old, I think, 1/4-inch tape or whatever it is, and also trying to do justice to the music, because it's just stereo.
Yeah,
so
and my recollection of that as well is that when it went out either on New Year's Day or during the Christmas period by Radio Kent, I remember sitting with Johnny Regan. I think it might have been around his house actually, and we turned the radio on and tuned into it.
Yeah.
And we started with Fire from the Sky,
which
was our normal beginning song. And it was one of those which, it's my favourite song on the Fire from the Sky album anyway.
Right.
Probably one of my favourite Denigh songs. So we went into that, and of course the two guitars, and that sounds great. And then Johnny came in with the drums, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. And the recording couldn't cope with it. But of course you've done some work already, because we've witnessed that on Fire from the Sky, the album, the 2 tracks. Give me strength, Space Pusher.
Yes, that was we looked into whether we could restore them. John found all the tapes. And I think they were a copy of a copy of a copy. So I mean, they were quite degraded and stuff. They were the 2 tracks that I started with to see if we could actually restore it and put some balance back into the into the tapes, because they were not degraded as such, but because they were recorded on stereo, you can't just push the guitars up or bring the vocals out.
Sure.
It goes across the whole song. It's like listening to the radio and adjusting the EQ on a radio signal, which essentially is what it is. So I experimented with seeing if we could extract all of the instruments and then try and get a balance back into it, and also lift the quality of it a little bit. Space Pusher which I thought was a Deep Purple cover. I didn't realise it was actually a Denigh song. It's from the original lineup. It was a Steve Maddox song, I think. Or a Denigh song, but with Steve Maddox. It came out kind of okay, so we decided to put it on as a bonus track onto the end of Fire from the Sky.
No, they're good. And I think that was sort of, as I was saying earlier about studio work, Denigh was such a live band. The studio work was, I suppose, a necessary evil almost. But, when you listen to the studio stuff and then you compare it to what live recordings exist,
the energy on stage was always really good.
Live band.
So Fire from the Sky, how old is it now? 40 years old?
50, plus 40, it's 40, getting 41 this
41
year.
This year. The re-release of the album
was last year. We built that. As the 40th anniversary.
Of course. So the new material. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's certainly very different. When I first heard stuff back in the game, I think the first track that was pushed out was a very brief section of Black Sheep.
Black Sheep. Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
It was such a hook line on it.
Yeah,
and I think it was one of those songs where you only have to listen to it once, and then it was stuck in my head, and I had to keep on playing that section because that's all that was on YouTube at the time. And it remains my favourite
of the album.
Off the album.
Yeah.
Is it what you would expect from Denigh? Well, all bands evolve, of course, and
of the band,
it isn't what everyone would associate Denigh to be, but it is Denigh, and hats off to John and Ian. And one thing that you can't deny is the songwriting ability of the pair. I was thinking about some of the songs that I wrote in bronze, and there was probably a half a dozen or so. Comparing, particularly lyrically, the lyrics that John comes up with, absolutely fabulous. Compare mine were all. I had.
You brought "Give Me Strength" with you.
I did. Yes. That was one of the many, and it was all about angst, breaking up with a girlfriend, or give me strength, and don't blame it on me, and leaving was another song that I'd written in bronze, and I'm not sure again about the background was to give me strength. I think again it was one that Phil said, you did this song called "Give Me Strength, shall we have a go at doing it within Denigh?" I
think you co-wrote One-Eyed Jack.
I was talking to John about One-Eyed Jack, and I said, "Do you remember how we put that song together?" And he said, "No, Arry, I said, "We wrote that song between the three of us, and Johnny obviously putting down the rhythm section,
of course.
Within it was literally a matter of minutes.
Right.
We were setting up for either rehearsal or something one day. I'd set myself up. I'd had this riff in the back of my head, started playing it. Phil came over and said, "What are you playing there, Arry?" And I said, "It's just something which I've been working on at home." And so the main riff and the chorus, and then there was the bridge piece, which Phil immediately put together and worked out the harmony for, and then John almost immediately came up with a few lyrics, and it was, I think we'd probably written it. It needed polishing off.
Of course.
John, went away and looked at the lyrics, but it was done very, very quickly.
Yeah. And it quickly became a staple on the live.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
There's some great tracks on that album. and stuff that they'd been playing for years. So,
Yes.
Roulette is one that I think is a bit of a sleeper. I think the lyrics and the story behind that are really cool. Just a different thing. So when you came into the band, obviously another guitarist, I mean, Phil, a bit of a legend locally. So
absolutely.
How did that work?
Yeah, great. We clicked straight away, and I suppose that was, of course. I mean, we were sort of drinking buddies anyway, really.
At that point.
At that point, we used to meet up and go for the odd jar on a Sunday evening or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was, and Phil had enormous patience as well, because Phil was technically, unquestionably, I think he's probably the best guitarist that we've seen here locally. Whereas I didn't have that. I needed coaching and I needed explaining stuff. So when, for instance, we did Lean on Them Hard, and that there's a twin lead near the beginning of that, and Phil knew straight away what the harmonies were, and but had great patience with me, showing me what the second guitar should be doing, or the twin lead should be doing. So there's a bit of a. I really became, because I was a fan of Denigh anyway, and I had a huge amount of respect for Phil as a guitarist. When I joined Vigilante, so Denigh came to another natural end, one of many. And I was contacted by Dave Price, the lead singer in Vigilante, saying that we're no longer in Denigh, we're going through a few lineup changes. Do you fancy having a go? So it was a similar process, tape in the post.
Learn some songs.
I knew a lot of Vigilante songs as well. They were regulars. I mean, they supported Denigh and at the East Cliff Hall for that must have been for the gig with Radio Kent.
Okay.
Well, don't quite.
I wonder if there are any tapes for that. Anyway,
I auditioned, did three songs in the basement of the Kent Hotel on the seafront of Margate, and it went really well. And it felt that I'd been in the band for some time. But for the first gig, we played that at the Kent Hotel. The Kent Hotel was Vigilante's equivalent of the Royal Norfolk for Denigh. And we did this thing at the Kent Hotel, my first gig for Vigilante, where the outgoing guitarist Paul played the first set, and then I was going to be introduced and play the second set. And the guys in the band said, right, we want you to go on stage and then just do some solo riffs, and then we'll go into a Vigilante song. Can't remember what the song was, but I got so carried away playing Phil type riffs, that really, you know what I mean. And it got to me playing the intro of that Vigilante song. I completely blanked, and I had no idea what I should have been playing, because I had just Denigh stuff cluttering up my head. And I said, someone else take it away. So D Lane, the other guitarist in Vigilante, who need to put out a shout for D, sadly passed away last month.
Wow.
So he took it away, and then we played, and that was again, it's first gig's always the best, really. First gig with Vigilante was great, but those opening few bars where I had a couple of minutes of just playing solo, all influenced by Phil.
Right.
So
big influence then.
Huge.
Yes,
And in terms of influences generally, I don't think I've ever had they're a guitarist that I admire hugely. Michael Schenker's probably my favourite guitarist.
Yeah.
You know, the work that he does on UFOs, Strange Than the Night, the live album is unbelievable. But there's also your guitarists in Wishbone Ash with the twin lead, which I hugely admire as well. But I'm probably not influenced by anyone particularly. And of course, I'd already been playing for a number of years before I joined Denigh. I went to Vigilante.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, and Phil became a band buddy as well. You know, we after Denigh or some time around that period, we probably formed the very first AC/DC tribute. We called ourselves ADBC, and we did a couple of really great fun gigs.
Yeah.
With Chris Daughters on lead vocals, you know, and Johnny was drumming, and and a guy called Ken on bass, and so we did a couple of those, and then after that we formed an all covers band called Nothing Fancy.
Right. So who was in that band?
So Chris Daughters on drums and lead vocal. There was Phil, there was myself, a guy called Ian Cameron, who'd had some work playing locally in the bands. He was a keyboard player come bass guitarist,
right?
So that was nice to have a keyboard player in the band as well. Then Ken Freeman on bass.
Yeah.
I think I've got that right.
Yeah, okay.
We played for, and we got quite a good. We were able to do a lot of gigs because it wasn't all heavy stuff, you know. Maybe ZZ Top and Bryan Adams and a bit of Poison and the likes. But a lot of venues would have us. But it wrecked Chris Daughters' vocals.
Oh, did it?
That's why we had to finish.
Oh, wow, did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, playing drums and being lead vocal at the same time.
I suppose when because Chris was in Echo, right, with Gary Price.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Gary did the vocals, and I think Chris did the backing vocals. Is that right? Yeah, I suppose it's a big ask.
Yeah, but Chris has got a fabulous voice, you know.
He has. Yeah, he's got a great voice. Yeah. The recordings from I think we've got another restoration project with the Battle of the Bands.
Yes, that's right. I remember it.
Yeah, and that was the 3-piece with Phil, Chris, and John. And Chris does bring a different element to the Denigh songs when he's doing the backing vocals with John. So it's quite a nice juxtaposition as well. So. Right. So that came to a halt because of Chris.
Because of Chris. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were the odd reunions, I guess, but nothing stand out.
It's been fantastic catching up.
Yeah.
So I'm moving to France. So hopefully it won't be 40 years next time. So,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So. This has been really fun.
Yeah.
We have to do it again.
Yeah. Absolutely. Give us a hug.
Yeah.
Fabulous seeing you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. Thanks.
Good.